Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel Biodiversity and Conservation. I am Subharashmi Raut from Ambika Prasad Research Foundation, India, and we are continuing our UGC NET examination series for environmental science subject, and this is 28th part of Unit 3, Environmental Biology. Today we are going to discuss about carbon cycle. So when we say carbon cycle, what do we mean by carbon cycle? So the carbon cycle is the process that moves the carbon between plants, animals, and microbes, minerals in the earth and the atmosphere. So it is the movement of carbon within all the um, biosphere or geosphere, hydrosphere, or atmosphere of the earth. So carbon is the fourth abundant element in the universe with its ability to form complex molecules such as DNA and proteins. And carbon is the form of carbon dioxide, which is important part of our atmosphere, and it helps to control the Earth's temperature. So most of the carbon on Earth is stored in rocks and sediments, and the rest is present in the oceans, atmosphere, or in the living organisms. And the carbon is a main component of biological compounds as well as a major component of many minerals like in limestone. And the carbon cycle comprises of many sequences, or there are some sequence of events that are key to making the earth capable of sustaining life, and it describes the movement of carbon uh, as it is recycled and reused throughout the biosphere, as well as long-term processes of carbon sequestration and from the carbon sinks or to the carbon sinks. So when we say carbon sinks, what do we mean by that term? Uh, Carbon sinks are used to refer the places where carbon is stored away from the atmosphere, like ocean. It can be a carbon sink because there is storage of carbon in the seabed or ocean bed, and uh, to describe the dynamics of the carbon cycle, a distinction can be made between the fast and slow carbon cycle. So here the fast carbon cycle is referred to as the biological carbon cycle. Uh, it can complete within years and moving some substances from the atmosphere to the biosphere, then back to the atmosphere. But the slow carbon cycle, which is also called geological cycles, they they can take millions of years to complete, moving the substances through the Earth's crust between rocks, soil, ocean, and atmosphere. And the human activities we will discuss in the last slide, that they have disturbed the fast carbon cycle for many centuries by modifying land use and moreover with the recent industrial scale mining of fossil carbon and the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere have increased from the pre-industrial levels, and this forces um, the greater atmospheric and earth surface heating by the sun. The increased carbon dioxide has also caused a reduction in the ocean's pH value and is uh, fundamentally altering the marine chemistry. And the majority of fossil carbon has been extracted over just the past half centuries, and the rates continue to rise rapidly, contributing to human-caused climate change. So, in this slide, it is a picture depicting the carbon cycle, where the carbon in the atmosphere is, we can say, sequestered and stored and used by plants by the process of photosynthesis in the presence of sunlight. So the carbon dioxide is used up by the producers. Then carbon fixation is done by consumers when they consume this, and after the death of plants or and animals, the carbon goes back to the soil through the process of decomposition, and after getting decomposed, these turn into fossil fuels, and the fossil fuels are then used up by industries, um, and while processing they produce a large amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases that goes back to the atmosphere. And in the decomposition process also, there is release of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and from the plant and animal respiration also carbon dioxide gets back to the atmosphere. So you can see there is a very low percentage of removal of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and um, in large percentage we are giving back the carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. So when the population is increasing and there is more industries and factories that release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and we are cutting down trees also, these all are leading to the increase of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which is a greenhouse gas that that traps the heat in the atmosphere, and the this trapping or the position of carbon in the cycle shapes our climate. And if carbon dioxide is uh, present in the atmosphere in very low amount, then the earth would freeze, and too much would turn the atmosphere into a furnace. So the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere helps to determine how warm the earth would be, and that's why understanding the carbon cycle and our role in that cycle is critical to the earth's future. And plants actually constantly exchange the carbon with the atmosphere. It absorbs carbon dioxide during photosynthesis, and much of this is stored in the roots and other parts of the plants. And then the plants and the soil release carbon dioxide when they decay, and other organisms also, when they exhale and when they die, they release the carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and to the soil. And the humans have a huge effect of in the carbon cycle. When we burn wood, fossil fuels, etc., this causes the release of the stored um, carbon into the atmosphere, which where it becomes a greenhouse gas, and the carbon can be removed from the atmosphere using a series of technologies called carbon sequestration, including direct air capture that pulls the carbon dioxide straight from the atmosphere. And there are also some main compartments of carbon cycle. First one is um, atmosphere. Second is terrestrial biosphere. Third is ocean, where we include dissolved inorganic carbon and living and non-living marine biota. sediments, including fossil fuels, freshwater systems, and non-living organic material, and the Earth's interior, like the mantle and crust. These are carbon stores which interact with other components through geological processes. So, um, in the atmosphere, the carbon in the Earth's atmosphere exists in two main forms, that is, carbon dioxide and methane. And both of these gases absorb and retain heat in the atmosphere and are partially responsible for greenhouse effect. Methane produces a larger greenhouse effect in comparison to carbon dioxide, but it exists in much lower concentration and is more short-lived than carbon dioxide. Thus, carbon dioxide contributes more to the global greenhouse effect than methane. And carbon dioxide is removed from the atmosphere primarily through photosynthesis and enters the terrestrial and oceanic biospheres. And the carbon dioxide also dissolves directly from the atmosphere into the bodies of water, as well as dissolving in precipitation as raindrops that fall through the atmosphere. And when dissolved in water, carbon dioxide reacts with the water molecules and form carbonic acid, which contributes to the ocean acidity. It can then be absorbed by rocks through weathering. It can also acidify other surfaces which it touches, like um, acid rain that has caused our beautiful Taj Mahal to get degraded day by day. And human activities also have increased the amount of carbon in the atmosphere, mainly in the form of carbon dioxide, both by modifying ecosystems' ability to extract carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and by emitting it directly by burning fossil fuels and manufacturing concrete. And in the terrestrial biosphere, the amount of carbon stored in the Earth's various terrestrial ecosystems is in a large amount, very, very large amount. The terrestrial biosphere includes the organic carbon in all land living organisms, both alive and dead, as well as carbon stored in the soils. So, most carbon in the terrestrial biosphere is organic carbon, while about a third of the soil carbon is stored in inorganic forms like calcium carbonate. And the organic carbon is the major component of all organisms living on Earth. Autotrophs extract it from the air in the form of carbon dioxide, converting it into organic carbon, while heterotrophs receive carbon by consuming other organisms. Because carbon uptake in the terrestrial biosphere is dependent on biotic factors, it follows a seasonal cycle or a diurnal cycle, and the combustion or respiration of organic carbon releases it rapidly into the atmosphere. It can also be exported into the ocean through rivers or remain sequestered in soils in the form of inert carbon. Carbon stored in the soil can remain there for up to thousands of years before being washed away into rivers by erosion or released into the atmosphere through soil respiration. Next one is ocean. And the ocean can be divided into a surface layer within which water makes frequent contact with the atmosphere, and the deep layer, which is below the typical mixed layer depth of a few hundred meters or less, within which the time between consecutive contacts may be centuries. And the dissolved inorganic carbon in the surface layer is exchanged rapidly with the atmosphere, maintaining the equilibrium. And mm, but the time scale to reach equilibrium with the atmosphere is hundreds of years. And the exchange of carbon between the two layers, driven by thermohaline circulation, is slow. So the carbon enters the ocean mainly through the dissolution of atmospheric carbon dioxide, a small fraction of which is converted into carbonate. It can also enter the ocean through rivers as dissolved inorganic carbon. It is converted by organisms into organic carbon through photosynthesis and can either be exchanged through the food chain or precipitated into the ocean's deeper and more carbon-rich layers as dead soft tissue or in shells as calcium carbonate. It circulates in this layer for longer periods of time before either being deposited as sediment or eventually returned to the surface waters through the thermohaline circulation. The oceans are basic, that is, the pH value is of 8.1 to 8.2, and the increase in the atmospheric carbon dioxide shifts the pH of the ocean towards neutral in a process called ocean acidification. And the oceanic absorption of carbon dioxide is one of the most important forms of carbon sequestration. So the projected rate of pH reduction could also slow the biological precipitation of calcium carbonates, thus decreasing the ocean's capacity to absorb carbon dioxide. Next one is the geosphere. Um, the geologic component of carbon cycle operates slowly in comparison to other parts of the global carbon cycle. It is one of the most important determinants of the amount of carbon in atmosphere and thus of global temperatures. Most of the Earth's carbon is stored inertly in the Earth's lithosphere. Much of the carbon stored in the Earth's mantle was stored there when the Earth formed. Some of it was deposited in the form of organic carbon from the biosphere. Of the carbon stored in the geosphere, about 80% is limestone and its derivatives, which form from the sedimentation of calcium carbonate stored in the shells of marine organisms. And the remaining 20% is stored as kerogens formed through the sedimentation and burial of terrestrial organisms under high heat and pressure. The organic carbon stored in the geosphere can remain there for millions of years, and the carbon can leave the geosphere in several ways. And the carbon dioxide is released during the metamorphism of carbonate rocks when they are um, subducted into the Earth's mantle. This carbon dioxide can be released into the atmosphere and ocean through volcanoes and hotspots. It can also be removed by humans through the direct extraction in the form of fossil fuels. After extraction, the fossil fuels are burned to release energy and emit carbon they store into the atmosphere. Now, the carbon cycle can be of two types, or there is both the cycle which are interconnected with each other. There is a fast cycle and a slow carbon cycle. The fast cycle operates in the biosphere, and the slow cycle operates in rocks. The fast or biological cycle can complete within years, moving the carbon from biosphere, then back to the atmosphere. The slow or the geological cycle may extend deep into the mantle and take millions of years to complete, moving the carbon through the Earth's crust between rock, soil, ocean, and atmosphere. The fast carbon cycle involves relatively short-term biogeochemical processes between the environment and living organisms in the biosphere, and it includes the movement of carbon between atmosphere and terrestrial and marine ecosystems, as well as soils and seafloor sediments. The fast cycle includes annual cycles involving photosynthesis and vegetative growth and decomposition. The reactions of fast cycles to human activities will determine many of the more immediate impacts of climate change. The slow or deep carbon cycle involves medium to long term geological processes belonging to the rock cycle, and the exchange between the ocean and the atmosphere can take centuries, and the weathering of rocks can take millions of years. Carbon in the ocean precipitates to the ocean floor where it can form sedimentary rock and be subducted into Earth's mantle. Mountain building processes result in the return of this geologic carbon to Earth's surface. These are the rocks that are weathered, and then the carbon is returned to the atmosphere. And other geologic carbon returns to ocean through the hydrothermal emission of calcium ions. And the volcanoes also return the geologic carbon directly to the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide. However, this is less than 1% of carbon dioxide put into the atmosphere by burning fossil fuels. There are some influences of human on the carbon cycle. The carbon dioxide emissions have been caused by different sources that are ramping up one after another, and the partitioning of these carbon dioxide emissions shows that the most emissions are being absorbed by the carbon sinks that are maybe plants, maybe ocean, forests, etc., including plant growth, soil uptake, and ocean uptake. Since the Industrial Revolution, and especially since the end of World War II, human activity has substantially disturbed the global carbon cycle by redistributing massive amounts of carbon from geosphere. Humans have also continued to shift the natural component functions of the terrestrial biosphere with changes to vegetation and other land use. Man-made carbon compounds have been designed and mass manufactured that will persist for decades to millennia in air, water, and sediments as pollutants. Climate change is amplifying and forcing further indirect human changes to the carbon cycle as a consequence of various positive and negative feedbacks. And the current trends in the climatic change lead to higher ocean temperatures and acidity, thus modifying the marine ecosystems. Also, acid rain and polluted runoff from agriculture and industry change the ocean's chemical composition. So, such changes can have dramatic effects on highly sensitive ecosystems like coral reefs, thus, the limiting of the ocean's ability to absorb carbon from the atmosphere on a regional scale and reducing oceanic biodiversity globally is important. And the exchanges of carbon between the atmosphere and other components of Earth system collectively known as carbon cycle, currently constitute important negative feedbacks on the effect of anthropogenic carbon emissions on climate change. So the climate sinks in the land and the ocean each currently take up quarter of the anthropogenic carbon emissions each year. So these feedbacks are expected to weaken in the future, amplifying the effect of anthropogenic carbon emissions on climate change. So there is also large and one of the fastest growing human impacts of the on the carbon cycle and biosphere is the extraction and burning of fossil fuels, which directly transfer the carbon from the geosphere or the land into the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide is also produced and released during the calcination of limestone for clinker production, that is industrial precursor of cement. And there are also various land use changes, like the humans have directly and gradually influenced the carbon cycle over century-long timescales by modifying the mixture of vegetation in the terrestrial biosphere. And this has, over the past several centuries, direct and indirect human caused land use and land cover change has led to the loss of biodiversity, which lowers the ecosystem's resilience to environmental stress and decreases their ability to remove the carbon from the atmosphere. More directly, it often leads to release of carbon from terrestrial ecosystem into the atmosphere. Deforestation for agricultural purposes removes forests which hold large amounts of carbon and replaces them, generally with agricultural or urban areas. Both of these replacement land cover types store comparatively small amounts of carbon, so that the net result of the transition is that more carbon stays in the atmosphere. And however, the effects on the atmosphere and overall carbon cycle can be intentionally or naturally reversed back with reforestation. So we should think before we cut a tree, or we should plant more trees. And this is all from me today. Thank you.